Admiral, you've really succinctly laid out how the world works for us right now. I mean, it looks very simple. But as you were to break down this interconnected web of global treaties, population movement, population growth, it seems to me that at the core of all of this is people, water, and energy, and the need and the quest for solving some of those challenges. Why is the water-energy nexus so crucial to international and global security?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would like to hear my colleague's point, but I really meant to sort of introduce that. It is about how people and nations behave. People need water, people need energy, and lacking sufficient access to both, it drives more extreme behavior. And that extreme behavior, starts locally and socially and ends up being more regionally and politically. But the essential human need for that, the lack of it creates a friction point, and that creates problems. And so if our dream is a economically viable, stable planet, then access to resources, water and energy, very high on that list, is an essential element of human life. I mean, it's essential to human behavior. So.
Well, that's great. Ravi, you're the CEO of the Renew Group. You do work globally. And Harman, president at SEW, another global company that works in the water energy nexus space, taking up what Eric was just speaking about that interconnectivity. From a business perspective, from a foundation perspective, how can corporations and non-state actor groups do more to help people out around the world as we try to expand accessibility to water and energy?
You know now? Okay. So I've worked a lot out of Singapore and different parts of the world. I was born and brought up in India, so I knew what water was a real resource, because if you turn on the faucet, you probably won't get it most of the time. And then when I came to US, it was over-flooded. You could get it all the time. And as I've traveled and worked across the globe, I found a couple of things. Water and lack of water can cause migrant displacement. Lack of energy can cause migrant displacement, and you're seeing that in various economies around the globe right now. So one of the things, since I came from a telecom background, we realized was the best way to take an infrastructure and make it more flexible, scalable, and usable by more people was to inform the customers of their use cases. So it became very important that anything you use as an infrastructure, you need to communicate with the customers to how they're using it. Okay. Unless you do that, it is actually abused. Then you start charging for it, then it gets used, and then it gets better and better. So part of what we are doing as a company, and when I talk to people, is how do you take the current infrastructure, make it usable for more people by either saving the water or communicating with the customers to what their use cases are. And if you notice that famous book, The Butterfly Effect, I always go back to the 3 W's: who is using it, why are they using it, and what are they using it for? So if you do those 2 things, you can actually figure out very quickly that a lot of times people waste things because they actually don't know. But if you can inform and communicate with them, that works. So by empowering, educating, all you're doing is engaging the customer in some way, shape, or form to know that what they're using is an important resource, and it costs money to make it. So our focus has been creating products which communicate this data with the customer, and then be able to bring it back home to the utilities and help them identify use cases which make it better. That's pretty much it.
Harman, do you have some thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, just building upon on what Ravi said. So we are a software provider. So I'll bring in the technology actor perspective. So we provide software and cloud platforms for that last mile of connectivity with the customer. So we operate in different countries and we see different use cases, different requirements, but you can use the same technology in multiple different ways to solve the problem. Working here in the more advanced countries in the West, it's more about efficiency and conservation. Again, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So a lot of us in the room, how much do we know about our own water use or energy use? Are we being efficient? Did you use enough water last month? Were you efficient compared to how much you should be using? Most of us don't know. So if we don't know, we are not measuring it right, and if you're not aware of it, we can't really manage it, and we can't become efficient. When you go internationally, in different countries, in different markets, access to water is a problem. So to Ravi's example, you turn on the tap, it may be there, it may not be there, and we see rationing all the time. We see watering schedules that utilities are pushing out to customers. So in that case, for the customer to be able to access water or be efficient about it, they need to know the schedule. They need to know when is my turn, which day of the week, which time of the day. And so the requirements are different, but you still at the end of the day need to connect with that customer. And that is the theme of the discussion today, at least for me, to highlight that perspective. Unless we bring that customer into the discussion, we won't be able to solve the problem, because at the end of the day, it's their hand on the tap. It's their hand on that final switch to say how much I want to consume. We can provide programs, we can draft policy or regulation, but it'll come down to them to effect that change and make the right decisions.
Thank you, Harman. Admiral, as Harman mentioned, if you don't measure it, you don't know. What are some of those crucial global security threats that are related to the water energy nexus out there right now that folks like yourself and the Defense Department are really paying attention to?
Well, it's scarcity. Water is a consumable, as is energy. You produce it, you use it, you give it back in a condition where it has to be regenerated in order to be usable again. And I think with a growing world population and a growing general demand for energy, it is satisfying the global demand that is a stabilizing or a destabilizing factor, including bad actors, either state or non-state, who use their hands on the taps or their hands on the dials to meter what is available to their populations, in some cases to control them, in some cases to influence the behavior of neighboring states. So it is encouraging now that in the Department of Defense strategy that we're seeing such things as climate change and competition for energy, the potential for resource wars beyond oil, highlighted as national security considerations, at least getting the senior leaders thinking about that. You didn't see that 10 or 12 years ago.
You talked in your speech about climate change and about the global impact that might have on water scarcity, energy scarcity. And this actually, I'm going to open it up to all three of you here, and we'll start with you, Ravi. What are some of the things that we can do to mitigate the potential impact of climate change on availability of water, on the availability of energy, as we're at the same time trying to increase access to more and more people?
Yeah, I don't know if I can do much about climate change, but what you can do
You're not going to solve it for us right now?
Not yet.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But I think what you can do is provide enough information and educate the consumer to understand that what they have is a very valuable resource. I use this example all the time that 50 years ago, the Mideast had no oil, but they were looking for water. Now they have oil, the money, and they're still looking for water. So it doesn't matter how much money you have or don't have. Ultimately, you need water. You need water to survive, and you need food to live. So water gives you food and vice versa. So from that perspective, it's absolutely crucial to understand that it's a very, very valuable resource. And you have to actually let the customers know that. Now, most customers don't understand it until you actually either penalize them or give them an incentive. Those are the two things which work all the time. And both of them actually work in different parts of the world. And to Admiral's point, Singapore considers water as actually a massive security issue because they have zero. So all their water actually comes from Malaysia. And if you think about it, all they have to turn the faucet off, and Singapore as a country can vanish, actually. So its water has become this very unique, it has taken a very unique position, which is causing major shifts in economies just because of that. And if you look at the last maybe 3 weeks, there was a big article about how Malaysia is going to charge more for water coming to Singapore. And just based on that, they have political issues going on right now. So, but at the end of the day, I think regardless of how much water we create, you still have to save. And if you don't do that, there's not enough water to ever go around to actually make it work. So what Manoj was working on from a recycling perspective, saving water by knowing what customers are using it for, and having highly efficient communication channels to let customers know what is required and how they're using it is actually very crucial.
Harman,
Yeah,
are you going to solve climate change for us right now?
Maybe give it a shot.
Thanks.
So just to build upon that, I think again from a technology standpoint, if you think about it, I'll talk about the energy side of it. So we are here in California. All IOUs are going through the time of use rate rollout, and I live in Southern California. If any of you are here or wherever you live, how many of you actually know the new time of use tariff that you are paying today? Not too many. So, I'm in Southern California. Southern California Edison has a new rate for me. It has a seasonality, and it has time of the day, and then it has 2 tiers in terms of summer and winter. Most of the people cannot understand that. And if we think this is the final state, it is not. Our interaction with the energy and water provider as a consumer is only going to get a whole lot more complex. We'll have complex systems at home. We now have mandatory demand response, energy efficiency type standards more and more in focus. We have rates getting more complex. We have electric vehicles coming in. As a part of from a consumer standpoint, as part of your household budget, if you think about it, the energy spend and water spend will become more and more in focus. And I'm not saying it's going to go up drastically in short term or long term, but it's going to be more and more critical. So, how do we affect change? That is how the utilities are affecting change. That's how the regulators are affecting change by coming out with programs which are, either pricing the commodity or incentivizing the customer to change their behavior, but the customer is not ready. The customer is not aware. So from a technology standpoint, to your question, what we are thinking as a technology player is playing a role in that, creating that awareness and giving more tools to the end customer and bridging that gap by bringing that customer into this discussion where they are aware the programs that they are being offered, the options that they are being offered, and the technologies that they're being offered are actually usable, easy to use, and a part of their day-to-day experience.
That's such a great point, Harman. As customers, they want to save energy, they want to save water, but if you don't understand what time of use pricing is in the United States, how are you going to take full effect of that new program that utilities around the country are starting to roll out? As we conclude, Admiral, just your last thoughts on what policymakers, what leaders from the military and government community can do to help mitigate some of these global challenges that we face.
Yeah, I don't speak for anybody but myself here, so I can't really represent government or any other military leaders here, and I've been out of military myself for a few years. But just let me take a micro example. No nation can solve this. No nation through its own regulations is going to fix the ozone layer or clean up the oceans or any of that. It takes a global effort, a globally cooperative effort. Nations have to understand mutually the problem and then work together to solve it. And that requires, again, sort of turning down this friction. So, and if part of, so here's a micro example. When Russia invaded South Ossetia, military invasion in Georgia, it seized part of South Ossetia, NATO was muted in its protest because NATO depends on Russia for its energy, except for France, which is almost entirely self-dependent on energy, 70% of it nuclear. So if you just create a scenario where Western Europe is less dependent on Russia for its energy, then you've reduced a level of potential friction. And technologies like SCW, which reduce the level of waste, which improve the efficiency of distribution, which sort of can help the utility industry of a place get a better handle on how energy is managed, can contribute to that. And so this is not going to be a switch that you flip and all of a sudden it's fixed. It's going to be a billion efforts across the globe that ultimately come together to do this. And I think that the thinking, I sense a thinking in our leadership that is just becoming an important element of what at least the Defense Department needs to do. We don't have an expeditionary Commerce Department, Treasury Department, Transportation Department. We have expeditionary military, and it's taking that on as part of its mission. The reason that my old command is in 75 countries a day is to help improve conditions in that place, build relationships that might matter.
Well, thank you all for your remarks and your comments. I think that really does a nice job of kicking this day off. Echoes back to Manoj's point about that billions and change that you just mentioned there, yep. Admiral. So give it a nice round of applause to this panel. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good thing.